Going on to lesson 1.4, square root and order of operations with real numbers. There are quite a few objectives, but again, we'll be going over these, and as we do them, then you can cite individual subsections. So when we think of square roots and order of operations, and review is a kind of a key important item throughout this. So have you heard of this before? P, please. E, excuse. M, my. Dear Aunt Sally. Well, this is an acronym, and what it stands for, the P is parentheses or grouping symbols. E, exponents. And we sort of take these two together, which we'll get back to shortly, then multiply, divide, and then adding, subtracting. Something that is followed by mathematicians so that when examples are calculated, everyone gets the same answer. So we'll be going over this shortly. Background, but square root. Now, what they've done here in table 1, you don't need to copy this into your notes, but if you want to do a few, that would be fine. So if we have 1 that's squared, that is 1 times 1, that gives you 1. If you have 2 that's squared, 2 times 2 is 4, and so on. And they take you through perfect squares. So then when you take the square root of something, like let's say 16, you would go down here, there's 16. So the square root of 16 is 4. Now, there are various numbers. Look them over. Again, if you want to put some in your notes, that would be fine. But you'd want to know how to put the radical sign and then a value into your calculator so that you can find square root. Now, example 1, again, you want to write the example numbers in your notes. And then letter A, the square root of 100. Again, this is a perfect square. That's 10. Then for item B, the square root of 169. That's 13. Item C. Now, this is a little tricky because it's a negative square root of 121. Well, the square root of 121 is 11, but now we apply that negative sign that's out in front, so this would become a negative 11. And a similar one for letter D here. This is the negative, or the opposite, of the square root of 361 that you may not know offhand, but that is a 19, and then you apply the negative. Something straightforward. Again, you want to know the protocol. Now for example 2, I've written it large here. This is going to go through the protocol. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally for doing this particular example, and we're going to use a whiteboard for this. So again, there are no parentheses. No, the only grouping symbol is the radical sign here. And what do we do first? Well, we're going to then do multiplication division as it comes, and we see we have here division. So following this through step by step, 36 divided by 4 is 9. We keep the negative sign. Then the square root of 36 is 6. And then we square the 2. 2 times 2 is 4. So what do we do next? Do we do the subtraction or the multiplication? we do the multiplication. So negative 4 times, or negative 6 times 4 is a negative 24. And subtracting that from a 9, we end up with a negative 15. And if we look at the work, going back to our problem, we see a negative 15. All right, noting example 3, and I've copied it down carefully. Be sure to number your examples. We'll go to the whiteboard. So again, now we're seeing grouping symbols. And let's just give you some general background in grouping symbols. And put this in your notes too. So one would be a parenthesis. Another common one is brackets. Another, braces, all grouping symbols. Another is the radical sign. Another would be absolute value, which is our two vertical lines. And then often overlooked is the division bar in fractions. That is a grouping sign. We have the numerator on top and the denominator on the bottom. So here we have parentheses. So we're going to do what's inside the parentheses first. So 3 squared is 9, minus 1 is 8. Now we have a negative 3 here, times, but now we have exponents. So we need to do the exponents first. So this is 2 to the third power, which is 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. So now we have multiplication, subtraction, and multiplication. So we do the multiplication first. So this is going to be a positive 16, and this will be a negative 24, which gives us then, when we do this, a negative 8. And if we go back and take a look, we see the answer is a negative 8. Again, write down example 4. I've copied it. We'll go to the whiteboard. Now here, this gets a little more challenging. So we have a number of grouping symbols. And within this grouping symbol, we have a 2 minus 5, which will then give us a negative 3 that we're going to square. Came out a little funny here. Plus, now this is absolute value as a grouping sign. We have 2 minus 5 to the second, or 5 squared. Now, we have to do the exponent. Now, is it negative 5 that's squared, or just the 5? Well, it's actually only the item immediate to the left of the square symbol. So it's only the 5 that's squared. So this is going to be 2 minus 5 squared, which is 25. And I'm going to erase that and make this a negative 23. I wanted you to see where it came from here. And we're going to make a proper 2 there too. So this is squared, and this is a negative 23. Now again, there's a negative sign, and it's 2 to the third power. Now is it a negative 2 to the third power, or just the 2 to the third power? Well, similar to here, it's just the 2 to the third power. So 2 to the third power is 8. So this is a negative 8. So this is a kind of example where it's kind of easy to make an error. You need to be careful of the signs. So here it is a negative 3. That is our base to the second power. So negative 3 times negative 3 gives us a positive 9. Now the absolute value of anything is its positive value. So this is going to become a positive 23. and now we have a -8. So we can subtract the -8 from the 9, get a 1, and this ends up then being 1 plus 23, which is 24. And if we go back, we see our answer is 24. Now, as we look at example 5, be sure to write the number down, and we go to our whiteboard. This is a very challenging example. So we take it in steps. We have brackets here. So this is just going to be a 9 here, -2. Now, as we work inside this parenthesis, what's going on? And I've written it out in detail so we can follow it step by step. So 3 times 5 is 15. Now, -7 squared. Are we squaring a -7 or just the 7? Again, just the 7. So 7 squared is a 49, which we now include the negative, so -49. And then divided by 7 minus 3, taking that radical, which is 7 minus 3 is 4. The square root of 4 is 2. And then we're squaring the 2 and get a 4. So there's this line that I put up there. You could put it underneath. So 15 minus 49 is a -34 divided by 2 plus 4. So do we add this or do the division first? We do the division first. So -34 divided by 2 is a -17 plus 4 gives me a -13. Now a -2 times a -13 is a positive 26 plus 9 gives us 35. And if we look at what the Learn is offering here as we go back, we see we get a -35. And they do a nice job too, but I thought it'd be nice to see it laid out like this. Example 6 now, I've copied, and always check that you're copying it correctly. What do we do first? Well, again, we have some exponents inside a grouping symbol. So this is going to be 6. 5 squared is 25. Now, notice what we have here, a -4 squared. But is it the -4 that's squared or just the 4? Hopefully you've picked up on this now, it's just the 4. And then 2, a -2, and then times 3 to the 3rd power. If you're not sure what that is 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. So we've simplified it in steps. So this is going to be then 6 times 25 minus 16 is 9. Minus a -2 times 27 is a -54. So 6 times 9 is 54. And 50 minus 54, this we end up then with a 0. And if we want to display the answer, we see it's a 0. Works out nicely. Now, for example 7, write that down, and then carefully copy the example. As we see, there's a number of things we can do to take it to the next step. So here we have some decimal fractions, 5.2 minus 3. Now here, what is squared? Is it just the 3 or a -3? Well, because of the parentheses, the grouping symbol, it's the -3. So -3 times -3 gives us a positive 9 minus 2.4. and then plus 14.1. So here we're going to simplify this, then multiply it by 3, a negative 3, and then do our addition. So let's pause while we do that. I'll give you a chance, and then I'll come back and do it with you. Here, working with the decimals can be a challenge, but what I did is I did this subtraction here after I computed that, got a 6.6, multiplied it by a negative 3, got a negative 19.8, added the 5.2 and the 14.1, and got a 19.3 minus your 19.8, and I ended up with a negative 0.5. And if we check our work here, there it is. Okay. Now for example 8, take a moment. We want to copy it down, and we're going to work it step by step. So again, we have grouping symbols of absolute value. We have division, we have exponents. So we can start here on the left by seeing what we can do with this. Now, this, if we work it a little bit, we could do some cross-canceling here. 5 will cancel with that. And we're left then with a negative 3, 6, which is actually a negative 1/2, but it's the absolute value of a negative 1/2. Makes all of this then just 1/2. So we did a lot of simplification here. Now this is going to be minus 1/4, and we still have our division, but we have our exponents here. So we have to square 5/4, and that's going to become 25, or I should say 5/2, becomes 25/4. There we go. Now, this is interesting because we have a division of fractions here. And the rule for division of fractions, let's do that, a negative 1/4, we can put our 1/2 there if we want, is to change a division of fractions to a multiplication of fractions. And we do that by changing the division sign to multiplication, and then take the reciprocal, that is, flip this, and there we have it. So again, lots of background in fractions, and we do have a supplemental video for working with fractions. In fact, I'll put that up here as a, if you need it, a little supplement. Click on the I in the circle, will bring you to that one. And now what do? Well, we're going to do the multiplication here, and the 4's will just cancel out. So we now have 1/2 minus 1/25. But now we have to add fractions with different denominators. So I'm going to change colors, and what would be my common denominator between a 2 and a 25? Well, it's actually going to be a 50. So I have to make these denominators into a 50 by multiplying the fractions by some form of 1. Multiplying anything by 1 doesn't change its value, but we can make equivalent fractions. So what form of 1 will I multiply 2 by to get it to be 50? Well, 25 over 25, which is a form of 1. But now my numerator becomes 25 here. My denominator is 50, which is what I'm looking for. Then I have a minus, and I want to change 1/25 to 50. So what form of 1 will I multiply 25 by to get it to be 50? And if you said 2 over 2, that is correct. So our denominator becomes 50, our numerator becomes 2. So when we simplify that, we get 23 fiftieths. And there's the result of this one. Now this is some challenging work here. And as we see in the text, they also do it in a similar way. I've worked it out for you step by step. Okay, this will wrap up this particular lesson.